This is the fourth straight year that we've been honored to have, as a guest, the NCAA Division III Football Selection Committee Chair join us. Dr. Dick Kaiser was the first 4 seasons ago, or 3 seasons ago, actually, in 2008 to join us. And Director Joy Solomen, Athletic Director of Rowan University, for the third straight year is actually the chair. We thought it was done with last year. We were thrilled, and I'm not just saying that, we were thrilled that she would be back. We found this out a couple of weeks ago as chair again, selected by the rest of the committee to sit in that position. And I don't know of anybody better than Director Solomen to tell us what happened here and, to answer the questions regarding it. She was very gracious to say yes right away to our request this year. And Athletic Director and Committee Chair Joy Solomen, thank you for rejoining us here in the huddle.
Thank you guys for having me on, and I too thought I was done last year as chair, but more than happy to fulfill the responsibility. But yeah, it was an interesting couple days, and we're pretty excited about the outcome, about the selections and the bracket, and we think we have a very good competitive bracket, and should be a great experience for all the 32 teams involved.
Let's start like we usually do and talk about the process. I know that you sit on the regional subcommittee and then on the committee itself, and there's a certain order of events that goes on. For those that aren't used to it or that are new to it, why don't you explain what exactly transpired to get us to the point of the actual selection process? Sure.
This year, the national office and the championships committee wanted to put more responsibility on the regional committee members, and of course we've really pushed for a number of changes over the last year or so, and so the regional committees met via phone and basically discussed the teams, and then they went off the call and ranked the teams confidentially, and then the national committee would see the rankings the next day. This is the first time that the national committee has not been able to change any rankings from the regional committee. So we wanted to put more accountability and more responsibility on the people on those regional committees who are really in the trenches on a daily basis with all these teams. And we thought the process went well. I know that we did cut out one ranking because, again, has been our constant talk with football with just so few games. If we rank too soon, we really don't have enough data to do a good ranking. So we felt by knocking one ranking out and waiting an extra week that would give us additional data to make some of the decisions that the regional people needed to make. And then from there, we had the last ranking on Saturday, and then that's when the national committee gets involved, and obviously we had 25 at-large bids this year, 1 Pool B, and then 6 Pool Cs. So we basically, make sure we get all the automatics, know who they are, and then once we have them listed, and then we list the Pool Bs and make a decision on the Pool Bs, and then basically we're looking at what the regional committees felt would be the next people in line to be considered. And the process went much smoother this year. We did actually a 2-day process where we met last night for probably 3 to 4 hours, and then took a break and came back this morning at 8 o'clock and finished up with seating and actually really team selection and getting the stuff down as far as geographic regions and finishing out the bracket and doing officials and site reps. So we have a new computer system that's enabled us to do things a little more quickly and keep track of things, and I think it worked really well.
Now, let's start with what jumps out, at least for East Region followers, as a big surprise. I texted you actually earlier about this because, to me, this was a great decision. I have no dog in the fight. People should understand that. I want to see the best teams possible chosen in the at-large slots, as do you, I believe, and most other people out there. There's always a fight as to who that exactly is and what criteria we should use to get there. But there was the last rankings showing Endicott ahead of St. John Fisher. It appears that St. John Fisher somehow came back above Endicott after this weekend's game that Fisher played, but Endicott was idle as they didn't play in the NEFC championship game.
Right.
How was that decision made, to the best that you can tell us, and why did a 2-loss team jump over 1-loss teams, or I believe there are maybe 2 1-loss teams that might not have made it because of St. John Fisher getting selected for that Pool C bid? Take us through that as best you can. I know you can't give us everything about it because there's some confidentiality, but as much as you can, could you tell us?
Well, I think there was one more ranking which isn't published, and then the final ranking, and then the discussion comes down to, once you know who your automatics are, and then I think each region is going through and saying, okay, who would be the next strongest team that we would want up on the board to be considered for a Pool B, if we had a Pool B, which the East doesn't have a Pool B anymore, and who should we put up? What team should we put up to consider? And I know we, on the regional call, it was a discussion, by the coaches, and, who to put up. And I think when it got to the national call and all the teams were put up to be considered in there, I think, everyone felt very good on the national committee that St. John Fisher had an extremely strong strength of schedule. And yes, it was 2 losses, but the 2 losses were to 2 teams ranked above them, and that they were the best representative with their, if you looked at the data, and even with 2 losses, they still had strong numbers over the one loss team.
Well, I think it's an incredible decision, a good, incredible decision, because there was a lot of hope being lost, I think, by 2 lost teams that, or just by the entire landscape, by coaches that we've talked to in the past that say, boy, what benefit is there to scheduling tougher teams out there? Last year we brought up the discussion about subjectivity versus objectivity and strength of scheduling. Did you feel the ability this year maybe to have a little more subjectivity about the conference's relative strengths, or did this just go strictly by the numbers as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think there was some subjectivity. I think, the committee and the people here at the national office, the liaison, HuddLe, and then Ethan, we've been in constant dialogue over the last year at the AFCA meeting and stuff like that, and we really wanted to, we knew in our hearts that there were some issues that needed to be addressed, but we in the past have really been charged to handle the selection and the seating in, particular ways, and they were really being, it was being enforced. And I think in the discussions we've had over the last year, and whether, people whether they like it or want to admit it or not, football is its own, in a separate category because of the limited number of games. And, and realistically, a team could could lose their first 2 games and almost like, what's there to play for, type of thing. But I just think we did have a little more subjectivity this year. We felt we did. And when we put the bracket together and it needed to be approved at the next level, and it was a little shaky there for a bit whether or not it was going to be approved when you're looking at flights and geographic things like that. But it was. So we were really happy with it. We felt we did a good job and that we had a little more maybe leeway than what we've had in the past.
Well, I know we're going to get to the flights question and the bracketing and seating question in a couple minutes. I know James Baker and a lot of our audience is wondering about the Liberty League. James, I know you were looking at the Hobart situation a little bit coming into this and had a couple questions.
Yeah, on one hand, it was. I guess it's sort of it's a mixed bag, because I think a lot of Liberty League fans assumed that the Liberty League champion, in this case Hobart, would end up in what has been the last few years the Mount Union bracket. And I don't know, obviously, if the number 1 seeds have been declared or not, but looking at the current bracket, it would look like Hobart has ended up actually in the Marin Hardin Baylor, or the quote unquote South bracket, which is interesting, and they're paired both with teams from the West Coast, Texas. Just curious about the thought process of placing a team that traditionally in the first round has either faced NJAC or MAC opponents, and why it was thought that Wesley was the appropriate placement, particularly if Hobart does win. They end up either traveling potentially to Los Angeles or up to Oregon, which certainly will probably be a great expense.
Yeah, it's once we start this process, this is where we really have to move and finagle as far as mileage and flights, and again with the Division III philosophy geographically. And when you start to put everybody up on the board, and we think we have everybody just right where we need them, and then all of a sudden you're up with 3 or 4 flights, so now you got to go back in and we have to readjust them. And there was no two ways about it that there was definitely in the first round there would definitely be at least 1 flight, and if we kept the 1 flight, there might be 2 flights or more in the second round. I mean, we had to kind of project. Not you're projecting out, but you have to look at realistically what might happen. And then if we went with the 2 flights in the first round, and the reason I think we ended up doing that is we had really hard time in some areas matching up because of mileage, who should go where. And so that's where really what happened when it came down to putting whether it's a Hobart at Wesley or a Christopher Newport up at Kane. And believe me, we spent a lot of time on the computer with the mileage charts and flipping people around back and forth. And we'd think we had it, and then something else would pop up. And the reason that we sent Redlands and again, one of the things we've always tried to do is not to have teams in the same conference play each other again in that first round. And I know years ago that was always an issue, not just in football. So when you look at the Redlands issue and Calou, they're in the same conference. They played each other. We had an opportunity, and so we took a shot at sending them down to, I think, Mary Hardin Baylor, sending Calou up to Linfield, and people say, well, they played each other already, but that was a non-conference game, the first game of the season, and therefore we had 2 flights there, and again, it would give people an opportunity to play somebody else, and it worked out that way, and that's what we had to get approved by the people above us, and there was a lot of debate and conversation for us to get the final approval of, the bracket that we have now. But basically, really, the geographic issue is a major issue, so it's really hard. You really can't say it's a true seed when you get in certain areas because we do have to put people in other areas to finagle them around because of the geography and the travel issue.
Again, you're in the huddle with Rowan University Athletic Director and NCAA Division III Football Tournament Chairperson Joy Solomen. Director Solomen, first off, and I think Frank may have alluded to it at the start of our discussion, but I do have to commend the committee. I imagine it was challenging, a lot of data to look at. But I don't recall, at least in the few years that I've been following Division III football, a more interesting set of first-round games, just based on the fact that there's a lot of cross-regional games, kind of stuff that we'd like to see, honestly, in the regular season, but for whatever reason, whether it's due to financial constraints by the schools and or the NCAA's inability to help make these long-distance games a possibility. I do have to commend you guys for certainly one of the more interesting brackets we've ever seen. So I hope the committee at least takes that away. I'm sure that you'll hear from your critics, but for people who are just pure fans of the game and are interested in interesting first-round matchups, I can't imagine many more that would surpass this bracket.
Well, we're like I said, we looked at it and reviewed it, and I think everybody felt good about it for just the reasons you said. I think trying to keep teams away from each other, giving everybody an opportunity to have a great experience, and try to make it as best a true championship under the constraints that we're given, again, financially and geographically. But believe it or not, we have gotten some nice quick emails basically saying some of the same things. So that's nice for the committee to hear. And the guys worked, and we worked, hard last night and then all day today, up until about 2 o'clock this afternoon, I guess, finalizing some things. So we feel good about it. I think it's a competitive bracket, and I think it's really, going to be a great tournament.
Now, you know me, Director Solomen. I'm responsible for the nuts and bolts issues of this as I transition myself from more regional commentator to more national guy at this point in the season. So let me fire at you some of the questions I've been seeing come up. You're usually very fair in your answers, so I just wanted to give you the opportunity to address them because they are lingering issues out there. First, there doesn't seem to be any regional-centric nature anymore to I can't pick out what I would call the East-centric bracket, the South-centric bracket, etc. Is that true? I mean, are we really at that point where from now and, forever, we probably won't be seeing that type of activity anymore?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're asking me my personal opinion. I mean, I can speak from personal experience years ago when you would know ahead of time they had the East, it was a definite East, West, North, South, and they knew ahead of time the East was traveling. The East and the West would be matched up in the semi, and the North and the South, and then it got to a point, and I'm not sure where along the way, but a few years ago where, they kind of seeded the top 4 teams or picked out the top 4 teams and just put them in the different areas and then tried to match up from there, and I think that's what we're looking at, that it's really not going to be a true East or a true North. Again, depending upon how many teams get in from each region, where they're located, and again, we're constrained with the philosophy and the geographic region issues that we have to deal with, so that it's really not going to be a true seed or a true region.
Were the brackets on the so-called board basically, instead of 4 sections when you're replacing teams and matchups up there, just one big one like we're seeing in the bracket released by the NCAA?
Yeah, the one that like we had the whole left column there. We would put the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're trying to match in there and just fill it in, and it's not really identified as North, East, South, or West. And it's just what you're seeing. That I believe you're seeing the same thing I am. It's one long bracket, and then it's going out to the right, and that's basically how we filled the teams in.
Now, people are wondering. There was debate as to whether Mount Union or Wabash was the number 1 seed. Can you identify for us the number 1 seeds that we're guessing? I'm guessing actually it was Whitewater, St. Thomas, Mary Hardin Baylor, and Mount Union. Am I correct or am I off?
No, we had it was Whitewater, Mount Union, Mary Hardin Baylor, and Delaware Valley.
Oh, Delaware Valley, really?
Yes.
Good. That's a positive surprise, I know, for a lot of people, because there's debate as to whether or not Del Val was considered as a good enough undefeated team. What did you see in them that led you to that decision?
I think that part of the fact is that they were undefeated, but I think the committee just when we're looking at who we think are the top 4 or top 8 teams, and we discussed them all, and then when it came time to vote, we had our own computers, and we all voted, and these were the top 4 teams, and I think they were the top great decisions. The top 4 I think are good selections by the committee.
I'm not disagreeing with you. As an East guy, it's refreshing to see it. So I know James has some more for you.
Yeah, and Director Solomen, just maybe to play a little devil's advocate, let's say with Del Val in that number 1 seed, why not build a bracket around them, say, that includes Keene, Salisbury, Western New England, Hobart? I mean, obviously they are playing Norwich, the ECFC champ. But just kind of out of curiosity, given that this is certainly somewhat of a departure from prior years where you would have similar quote unquote regional conferences paired, what's your thought process there?
Well, I think again, as I mentioned earlier, kind of again, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't have the mileage charts and all that stuff in front of me. But again, I think it goes down to where people are located and what's the best region or the best bracket to put together for everybody. Depending upon, like you said, we had Mount Union and Whitewater and Del Val, and we kind of built around them. But the other issues came into play, and believe me, it had to do with geographic and where we could get people within a certain, within the mileage. And we had a few schools that are really located in some really tough areas, And again, we think we'd have it solved, and then we'd look and say, well, they've already played each other, or we need to move it around. So it really just came down to listing who the going through it sections at a time, and then just filling in where we felt they fit. And believe me, once we had them in, then we did some maneuvering. We might have had one bracket set up, and then we'd look and check out mileage and stuff, and then we'd have to flip around. We think we'd have it squared away, and it took us quite a while, really, to finally come up with the one we had and just leave it to the 2 flights. So it really wasn't a real easy situation, but I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's just, again, a lot of it is geographic when we get to this point.
And Rowan Athletic Director Joy Solomen and NCAA Division III Football Selection Committee Chair Joy Solomen is joining us in the huddle. It's a mouthful, but it's worth saying because she's done a great job on this with the committee, and also joining us here on In the Huddle, again, for the 3rd consecutive year. And Director Solomen, a lot of people wondering, seedings. Will we see the seedings? Because you have alluded to the numerical seedings, at play at least. Granted, they may have gotten shuffled up a little bit. 1 might not be meeting 8 necessarily, and 2 and 7, 3 and 6, etc. Will we get to see them? And if not, how are we going to determine who the home team is the following week if, let's say, maybe there were upsets or something like that happening?
Well, we don't there hasn't been the policy, and I know they had some questions today, to release the seeding because it really isn't a true seeding, and because of, like I said, having to shift people around and finagle a little bit. But what we normally do with the host, we all know who's hosting this week, and then the committee will meet. All the site reps will call on Sunday. We'll have a conference call every Sunday, and we'll review game situations and everything. And we really can't determine because sometimes you find that maybe somebody hasn't put into host. And we had a situation last year where 2 teams, hadn't put into host, or somebody came up with a situation. So we kind of go week by week, but we've never really, usually the team that's hosted in the beginning a lot of time, would be considered possibly the higher seed in that situation. And if they moved in, their chance of hosting would be very great, unless there were some major issues or they had not put into host. And so that's basically why we do it, because everybody does not fill out all the paperwork and put in to host, a game. So we kind of do it week by week.
One thing that jumped out at me, and I'm sure the NCAA, it jumped out at them even more when they went through the approval process, was that the 3rd round could actually be 8 different flights, technically, or 7 or 8 different flights because of some of the remote nature of what's going on with these teams and their locations and how they've been potted and bracketed in this year's bracket. Is that a concern at all? I mean, I'm sure the teams don't care if it's on the NCAA's bill, but, I mean, was that at least discussed in some ways that the 3rd round does have some logistical interesting steps coming up?
No, we didn't. They didn't project out that far, fortunately. Not really. No, the biggest concern was the first 2 rounds, and they really don't want us to project any further than that. And we're really not. We're just saying what the possibilities were, because they did question when we had the bracket, why this, and so we explained to them. And the idea was if we could get the 2 flights now, we just felt the 2 flights in the bracket we have now was the best bracket out there for this tournament, and in the best interest of everybody, and to give everybody a great experience. We got them through that because we really couldn't go much further because you don't know. So we did, they didn't project out to the 3rd round. So if it gets out to that point and there's all those flights, then so be it. Then it'll be taken care of. And that's just the way it's going to come up. I mean, you can't predict the game. Anybody can beat anybody on a given day. So if it works out and we have 4 flights or whatever, then we'll have 4 flights.
Again,
you're right. We're not paying for
glad
it.
I didn't interrupt that last one. We got to make sure that that's clear. You're in the huddle with Director Joy Solomen of the NCAA Division III Tournament Committee, and Dr. Solomen, we were talking earlier with Coach Craig of Hobart, and one of the questions, and obviously I think if and when the seedings are released, that may clear it up. But there was some questions around, Did Hobart, with the fact that they are effectively the only team in the field with that had an 8-game schedule, there are obviously a couple other teams in the tournament that have 7 wins, and there was one that had 6 wins. All appear to be 8 seeds playing the number 1 seed in their bracket. Hobart, you could say, is possibly a 7th seed playing a Wesley team that seems to be on the opposite bookend of the Mary Hardin Baylor bracket. Is it fair to say that either the scheduling situation for Hobart either potentially hurt them, and or that St. John Fisher, a team that they beat by 36 points earlier in the season, ended up getting a better seed, given that they would potentially play Del Val in the second round, meaning that they're potentially a 4 or 5 seed or a 3 or 6 seed? How did the committee come up with those matchups?
Again, and it's we didn't. There was no conversation of we'll just say they're only 7-1 or this team is only 8-0. It honestly came down to geography and trying to get the best matchups that we felt we could get. I mean, that was it. I mean, trying to get people into certain areas and trying to get 32 teams matched up together in the best possible scenario. And no, we did not look at their schedule and say, well, they only played 8 games or they did this or they did that. So that's the best answer that I can give you. That no, it didn't factor into it.
Now, every year we talk about things that might be able to be improved in your own eyes. Now, to take a step back from it after you've done it, sometimes you feel a little handcuffed by the mandates of the NCAA, et cetera. Did anything play into the decision-making process that was mandated, but you didn't necessarily want to do it that way, type of thing? Is there anything you can see that you'd like to see improved in the future? Kind of give us, as we start to wrap things up here, your view of how the process is. I mean, last year we were saying, this is your last year, so tell us about what you think could change. Well, it wasn't. You got another try to tell us some more stuff that you might want to see.
Well, I think we've made some headway. Like I said, we were really concerned with the direction that we were charged to go with last year, and in having the dialogue with the coaches at the AFCA convention, with the dialogue that HuddLe has been able to have with the powers to be here at the championships committee, and some of the other people that really oversee and put the final touches on our decisions and things we have to do. They really started listening, and so whether it's how we're selecting, how we're handling the championships, some of the things we need to do, getting more people involved in the championship, letting more players attend. I really feel that they're really sitting down and listening. I did attend a chairs meeting this year in September. I felt it was very productive, and some of the things and some of the concerns of travel party and things like that nature are all being addressed. It's just obviously going to take some time. You're trying to change a culture, and you're trying to change the way some people think. And again, we're stressing that football really is the premier championships of Division III. It's the sport that misses the least amount of classes, and it's a sport that plays the least amount of games. And so we have got to continue to try to find ways to make the selection process and the ranking process the best possible way that we can, under the constraints that we're given with the Division III philosophy. And I think they're on the move, and I think might see some more changes next year. What exactly they are, I'm not sure, but I know the committee and the dialogue's still going on about some things. So I think they're moving in the right direction, and I felt very good this year about the fact that we did have some subjectivity. We were able to be a little more freer in some of the decision making and things like that. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and there's some good leadership.
I know you mentioned the AFCA discussion that you had. I heard from an anonymous coach will say that you were sort of grilled at times about the idea of what we've discussed earlier, subjective versus objective, strength of schedule, the 1-loss versus 2-loss issue, et cetera. Has that type of dialogue helped you in your job to maybe convey to the NCAA what you wanted to change?
Absolutely. I mean, when you've been a coach and you've been in the trenches, whether it be football or whatever you're coaching, you want to try to convey the best message to the people that are making these decisions as to what's in the best interest of the sport. And it certainly has helped me. I know I've grown and learned a lot during this process. It's been a great experience for me. And like I said, I didn't expect to be in this position this year, but I was, and I'm very happy to be a part of the decisions that we made this year. And if any changes occurred and they're positive, I'm glad we were able to be a part of it.
Now, are you on the committee at all after this year? I don't know exactly how it works because, like I said, we didn't anticipate it ourselves. So what happens from here for you?
No, my term is up this year.
Okay, but
yep.
I have a feeling you're going to still be called on from time to time for your expertise in these matters. I'm just thinking 3 years, they have to have a little bit of institutional knowledge from Joy Solomen.
Well, I think part of our responsibility as athletic administrators are to be a part of these committees and to make our voice heard. And, even whether it's to your own president, even though, the presidents are running the show, the athletic directors are the ones that are involved in the committees and coaches are involved in the committees, and they're the ones that need to speak up and get to your athletic director or your president with some of the concerns. And, because sometimes the presidents don't really, fully understand. They got enough on their minds, let alone worry about the selection process for football. But I think if people take the time to sit down and explain what these things are, then they'll be able to make intelligent decisions and they'll be able to stand up and help move some of these processes along a little better.
Well, listen, I know I will personally see you in Salem, Virginia on a Friday night this time. Well, I'll see you before that during the week, but for a Friday night Stag Bowl, at least, for the first time that I can remember. I don't think it's ever been played on Friday before, to be honest, and it will be on ESPNU unless the NBA can't come to an end of their dispute. Maybe it'll get moved to ESPN, who knows, but nonetheless, you and your entire committee come down there and do a great job every year, so I'm excited to see you. But I got to say one more time, like I said earlier tonight to you by text message, I think you gave a lot of teams a lot of hope about the idea of scheduling tough teams, maybe finally being rewarded in a way that we can not necessarily quantify, but maybe get a better feeling for going forward. And I personally thank you for that. I know James does too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to a great tournament.
Absolutely. Thanks again to Athletic Director and Committee Chair Joy Solomen for joining us on In the Huddle for the third straight season. And James, as we always say every year, we enjoy the conversation, but especially this year, it came out of left field, those brackets and the way that they were lined up and everything. And we're not saying this in a bad way. We're not trying to be critical of the questions we asked. We're legitimately questions we saw throughout the night, and we felt the need and duty to ask them. We don't want to hammer at her, and make her feel like these were personal questions that we took umbrage with. But the answers to the questions were all great and fair, I thought. So we did appreciate her candor about everything here.